goes to encampments, work with people who are literally homeless and try to connect them in with services. We also were the administrator for the RAFT program and the emergency rental assistance during COVID. So we distributed over $10 million of rental assistance to our friends and neighbors in the region. We also build housing. We have over 250 units in the pipeline right now, so that's a big accomplishment. And picking up one of the threads that David was pulling on, our employers, our community, we need to actually add housing to the housing inventory. And thinking about this assignment and how do I encapsulate 20 years of bad policy that got us to today in 5 minutes was like, oh my gosh, virtually impossible. So really trying to think about like, what's that one thing that we all can do today, walking out of this room and walking forward with the great information that we've heard from these panelists and from the other speakers. As David alluded to, you have to get involved. We need to change the rules of the road. And I'm going to give you a couple scary statistics, and I'm going to try to then pivot to giving you some hope. Scary statistics. We are losing over 1,000 households a year off Cape Cod. They're moving away. As David said, a couple of his employees had to move off Cape. Well, guess what happens when people move away? They find other jobs. Right? People don't love commuting. Right now, over 50% of our workforce commutes onto Cape Cod. Bad for the environment, right? Bad for our communities, bad for our tax base, bad for economics all the way around. So what can we do? There's only one thing that we can do. We have to change the rules of the road. And I have to admit, it's dreadful, it's painful, and I personally went into this kicking and screaming. Because you've got to become a select board member. You've got to get on the planning board. You've got to get on the finance committee. And those are arduous meetings. They're painful to sit through. But I'm honestly, I'm on them. And I have to go to plenty and present. And it's you don't have kind thoughts when you're sitting there oftentimes waiting to think for your turn to speak. But it is the way of the world. And if people 20 years ago would have changed the zoning that allowed for multifamilies to be built, allowed accessory dwelling units, small apartments on your house, anything more than one house per lot, it's illegal on Cape Cod to build more than one house per lot. I have an acre. I don't need an acre, okay? My house sits at the front of my lot. I have a huge backyard that has to get mowed. I would rather have 3 little cabins for my daughters or whatever, another family to move into, right? Like it's not that we don't have enough land or that we don't have enough of the right kind of housing. And so shifting those policies is the only way out of this. And if our predecessors would have planted seeds of the trees that they would never have sit under the shade of, right? That's got to be our philosophy. We have to plant the seeds that we may never have the benefit of the shade from the tree or eating the fruit from the plant. But that is the only way out of this. Otherwise, the trajectory of losing 1,000 households, and these aren't just any households, these are our workforce. These are the households that are making under $100,000 a year. So these are our landscapers, our CNAs, our bank tellers. These are all of us, right? There's not too many of us here who are making over $100,000 a year, right? In fact, right now on Cape Cod, you have to make $200,000 to afford a house on Cape Cod. The household has to make $200,000 a year to afford to buy a house on Cape Cod. So let me walk you through that. That means you have to have about $150,000 for a down payment. Who's got that in their bank? Right? Interest rates right now are just making it even more unaffordable and unattainable. So we are on a trajectory of becoming Nantucket. We are on a trajectory of becoming a place that we can't afford, and you can only live here by legacy and by inheritance. And so if that's not the Cape Cod you want, or that you want for your children, or the community that you want to be part of, there's only one thing you can do, and you've got to write it on your list. You've got to go join the planning boards, be willing to speak to the planning boards, fight against ZBA rules and regulations, go to the select boards and make sure they know that housing needs to be the #1 investment. It's infrastructure. It's not a luxury. It's not an add-on. Our community literally cannot exist without it. And so I end with, that's the hope, is it's in our hands. It is possible to change the trajectory. My company has over 250 units in the pipeline now. If we change the rules of the road, then other developers like ours can come in and add a couple hundred here, a couple hundred there. We don't need 20,000 units. We need about 500 a year over the next 5 to 10 years. It's doable, but think about the businesses, right? You're not going to go into a place and starting a business where you can't do it. The rules or legislation won't let you do it. That's why, think of pot shops. Everyone's like, oh my God, you can make so much money. Let's open a pot shop, right? Well, there are rules and regulations that say you can't just go open a pot shop. That's the same thing with the developer, right? Someone isn't going to go, I'm going to go buy land and put millions and millions of dollars at risk when the rules are very clear, black and white. I can't do it. So guess what? They don't do it, and they haven't done it. But we can change that. So I don't have any magic bullet or gold nugget of how do you get housing and where do you go and what do you do. We got to change the rules of the road, and it's up to us. Thanks.
Did you think this was a powerful panel? What unbelievable information. And you know what I am